doctor friend of mine suggested a breathing class might help. I didn't know much about this, but went down, signed up, and was sitting in the corner of this studio, cold room, legs crossed, breathing in this rhythmic pattern. Nothing crazy, just and then really slow. And I sweated through my T-shirt, through my socks. My hair was sopping wet, sweat all over my face. So I went back to her. I said, "What happened? Like, you're a doctor, you should know this." And she said, "Oh, you must have had a fever, or the room must have been too hot." So she had no idea. But I didn't know what to do with that story, so I just kind of filed it away, forgot about it for a number of years until I met some freedivers. These are people who have, through the power of will, enabled themselves to hold their breath for 6, 7, 8 minutes at a time and dive to depths far below what any scientist thought possible. So I thought, wow, there's something in breathing here that I don't know about, and I figured other people might not know about as well.
That's really interesting. You know, I've known a bunch of free divers, and I've known a bunch of jiu-jitsu people that got really into yoga, primarily because of Hicks and Gracie. Hicks and Gracie, do you know who he is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
famous, probably the most famous of the like the classic jiu-jitsu people. He's known as being the very best. He was like one of the original real pioneers of jiu-jitsu in America as well. And there's this documentary on him called Choke. Have you seen it?
I have not, no.
It's really fascinating. This documentary, he's doing all this crazy stomach breath stuff, the yogi stuff, you know, because he's really into yoga as well for flexibility and balance and all those different things. And he was probably the first guy to introduce yoga to jiu-jitsu as well. But him and his son, who's also a world champion in jiu-jitsu, just stressed constantly that it's all about the breath and that breathing it's everything, that it's everything for jiu-jitsu, it's everything for martial arts, it's everything for your mindset.
Mm-hmm. You're going to find that in the foundation of so many different sports. I think a lot of that has been forgotten. I know that coaches in the 50s used to have their runners take a big mouthful of water, run around the track, and then they'd have to spit out that same amount of water into a cup to force them to breathe through their nose, to force them to move their diaphragms up and down a little more, because breathing is so essential to their recovery, their endurance, and their performance.
Yeah, one of the things I found interesting about your book was the experiment with plugging up the nose for, what did you guys do it for, a month? Is that what it was?
10 days.
10 days. And that 10 days, my nose was broken most of my life. I had a useless nose till I was 40, and then I got an operation to have my deviated septum corrected and the turbinates shaved down, and man, it changed my life. It really did. Like, I didn't realize, the term mouth breather is a really interesting term, right? Because it's a term for a moron. But I felt like a moron, like after I got my nose fixed. I was like, why didn't I do this before? Like, I was robbing myself of oxygen.
Yeah, and there's so much science supporting how injurious it is to constantly be breathing through your mouth. There's no debate about that. But what people don't realize is about 25 to 50% of the population habitually breathes through their mouths. And they don't realize the neurological problems that this causes, the respiratory problems this causes, problems with snoring, sleep apnea, even metabolic disorders. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So I had been talking to the chief of rhinology research at Stanford. We had done many interviews over a series of months. He's a big nose guy. So he said, this is the most amazing organ. No one's talking about it. At the NIH, there's no school for studying the nose and its effects, and he thought that that was criminal. So he had warned me how bad mouth breathing was, but no one knew how quickly that damage came on. So we knew that after years, it can change the structure of your face. It's so common in kids that it has a term called adenoid face. If you see these kids with very long faces, because they've been mouth breathing so long that their faces have actually, the musculature and the skeleture have changed.
It changes your skeleton.
Yeah. It creates a longer face. So, and that also makes these people much more apt to snoring and sleep apnea. So, but no one knew if a month of mouth breathing would be bad, a year, like how soon those issues came on. So I asked him, I said, well, why don't you test it? You're one of the best universities in the world. You have the means to do this. And he thought, in his words, it would be unethical because he knew how damaging that it could be for people. And so I volunteered. I said, Well, why don't you test it on me? I'll get somebody else to do it. They had no money for this, so we had to pay for this study just to experience what that was like. And the point wasn't to do some like jackass stunt. It was to lull ourselves into a position my body certainly knew. I think I was mouth breathing through much of my youth, and that 25 to 50% of the population knows, and to actually measure what happens.
Now, do you think there was some bacterial growth that was inside your nose as well from this? Do you think that some of that could be attributed to just the act of plugging the nose? Because you physically plugged it. It's not like you chose to breathe out of your mouth. You actually you closed up the opening.
Yeah, that's right. And it could. No one knows for sure because the less you use your nose, the less you're going to be able to use your nose, just like any other muscle. So when people start habitually breathing through their mouths, their noses are going to start to close up. And we know this from the doctor of speech language pathology at Stanford. She measured people who had laryngectomies, holes drilled in their throats so they could breathe. She found between 2 months and 2 years, their noses were completely blocked, zero air coming in. So the more you use it, the more you're going to be able to use it. So the less you use it, the more apt you will be to have problems with breathing through
what
your
is the
nose.
process? Well, why does the nose close up? It would seem that it's a hole. Like, why would that hole close?
It's not in use. Those turbinates, all those tissues just start closing up.